Hi, this is Carol Lord Oppenheim with ADSS Global in the Baltimore office, Towson, Maryland. And today we are going to review creating recurring transaction in Sage 300. So the three types of recurring transactions we're going to discuss are AP recurring invoices, accounts receivable recurring invoices, and general ledger recurring entries. So before we can create a recurring entry, we need to create a schedule to assign to that recurring entry. So I'm in the sample data for Sage 300 single currency. And we've got two recurring thing schedules already created. So the first one here is monthly, and the recurring period is monthly. And how often is 1 month? So my frequency is every 1 month. And what day on the first day of the month? You could also do any day of the month, and you can last day you would use last in the drop down because that would adjust the date based on how many days you have. Some days have 31, some months have 30, and others have, and February has either 28 or 29. So choosing last day would respect those changes or those differences. So anyway, in this example, it's monthly on the first. And if you wanted to do quarterly, you would change your frequency to every 3 months, just so you know. The recurring periods can be daily or weekly or semi-monthly or monthly or yearly. So that's what you do. So the next schedule that's already in sample data is a weekly schedule. This is often done for payroll journal entries or things that have to happen on a weekly basis. So in this example, it's weekly every 1 week. So bi-weekly would be every 2 weeks. Month, and it would be plural journal entries if you're not using Sage 300 payroll. So we'll just create another one just for fun. I like to use very generic schedule codes. So we're going to use M last. So that's monthly, last day. And we're going to do my frequency is going to be monthly. And it's going to be on the last day. Okay. And you can also set up reminders. So in this example, I have no users, but I could say remind all users, and then you tell how often. So maybe 7 days in advance, the schedule starts. We'll just say 10/1/2020 because the sample data is based on 2020 data. Okay. So that's how you set up schedules in Sage. If you want to see what's due, you can take a look at the reminder list. You can see I just created them last, and it's already prompting me to, use that schedule. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about AP recurring invoices. So you set these up under AP vendors and then recurring payables. So first we're going to look at one that exists and then we will create one from scratch. So we have one called equipment and that's for vendor 1890. It's attached to a weekly schedule code. There is no expiry date. You can see an expiration type here. No expiration, specific date, maximum amount or number of invoices. So you would have it stop at a certain time or not at all. The account set is inherited from the vendor, as is the default remit to. Description, PO, and order information that hopefully is helpful. And then, of course, the vendor's terms are inherited from the vendor defaults, but you can also override them here. The details section is your GL distribution. So in this example, we have $500 getting charged to equipment, lease, or rental. So now let's look at creating a brand new one. I'm going to create by clicking on the plus, and let's just say PNC loan. So we'll just say vendor 1200. We'll pretend that's PNC Bank. And it's going to be on an MLAS. We'll use that new schedule. The start date will be 10/01/2020. This checkbox here, if you have one that you're finished with, you can make it inactive by checking this box. But of course, we're not going to do that. Let's give this one an expiry of 24. We'll pretend that this is a 24-month loan. Remit to an account set, we're going to leave the same. Description, we can put whatever we want, but I'm just going to make something up. So we'll say 2020 Chevy Rock loan. And now I'm going to go to the detail, and this is where you enter your GL distribution. So I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to insert. I've just pressed the insert key on my keyboard. For description, I'm just going to put PNC loan. And I'm going to pick a liability account of some sort here. So let's open this guy up. And this works, bank operating loan. Okay. And I'll just say it's, I don't know, $1,200. So that is where I would set this up, okay? So what would happen in this example, 7 days before the last day of the month, when I signed into Sage, my reminder would pop up and tell me that there's something due, and it would tell me what was due. Then I would either from my reminder or from AP transactions or periodic processing, I would generate this invoice. So I'm just going to go into periodic processing, and I'm going to go to create recurring payables batch. And this brings up my date. So my run date is going to dictate what invoices are created. So this example that I just created was set up to start on 10/1/2020. And if I ran it as of 10/8/2025, I'd get all 24 because it's going to look at my run date plus my schedule date plus the recurring payable itself and figure what one is due. So you want to be real careful with your run date. So in this example, I'm just going to say 10/31/2020. I don't want to run them all. I'm just going to run my PNC loan. I'm using the Finder to choose that. And I have options default, create a brand new batch. That's usually what you want to do. You want to usually, every time you run this, you probably want to create a new batch. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to hit process. And now I've got one invoice created and placed in batch 63. Now, if I go back to my vendor, AP vendors, recurring payables, and I bring up that PNC loan, okay, so we're going to pull that up. Now we've got some more information. So it shows that my next invoice date is 11/1. Last generate was 10/1. So it knows the recurring payable knows that that invoice for 10/1/2020 was created. That's actually really important. So I'll get to that in a minute. So now we're going to go to AP transactions invoice list. And you can see we've got a recurring payable here. And it looks like sample data charges sales tax. So that's why we've got $12.99 because if I look at my totals, I've got $99 in taxes. Now, most places in the US do not track sales tax in AP, but in other areas like Canada for provincial sales tax, people do track that because they might be able to get that back. So in your example, if you're in the US, most likely it would just be a $1,200 item, not this $1,299. So anyway, there's my recurring payable. So one thing that's really important to understand is that if you realize after you ran your recurring batch, if you realize that the amount has changed, what you want to do is you want to batch that was created and fix it here, and then go also into the recurring batch, a recurring entry setup in AP vendors and fix that so that next time it'll be correct. You do not want to delete this batch because if I delete this batch, I cannot recreate it because the schedule knows that this particular one for October of 2020 has been run. So that's one of the most frequently asked questions that I run into with people is where they have a question about that. So I'm just going to go ahead and post that. So once you generate your recurring payable transaction, it's exactly like any other transaction. It's just that instead of typing it in manually, you've electronically created it. So AR is handled very much in the same way. AR customers, and then you go to recurring charges. So this is almost identical to AP. So let's see if we have any to demonstrate. So yeah, we do. So we've got a recurring charge for customer 1100. It's assigned to a weekly schedule. The start date is 2019 and ends in 2020. So this one has an expiry date. We've got some details, a PO number and a description, and we've got our GL information here. And that looks like it's our only AR. So in accounts receivable, to run a recurring transaction, you go to periodic processing and create recurring, whoops, let's get to the right module here, periodic processing in AR, and create recurring charges, okay? And once again, it gives me a run date, and I certainly don't want to do it as of today. So I'll do it as of 12/31, 2019. I should get a few, and then I'll put it in a new batch, and we'll process. I'm going to get okay, it looks like this is a multi-currency, and it looks like we got some issues with the exchange rate. So that didn't work. But that's why it was the exchange rate issue. So that's it for AR. Once again, if anything changes for your recurring transactions in AR, you just want to edit the batch and then edit the recurring setup in AR customers in order to make those changes. The last thing we're going to look at is general ledger journal entries. So this is actually done in GL setup, recurring entries. Okay, so we've got recurring entry codes, we've got bank charges, which I really wouldn't recommend because if you're doing journal entries against cash, it's not going to impact the bank services. So let's create a better example. So I'm just going to call it the EPR. So we'll call it depreciation. And the schedule code will be MLAS. I'll start it as of 10/31/2020. No expiry. Monthly depreciation. I will do a quick entry so that my reference and description is repeated. I'm going to make this a little bigger. So we're going to press insert to get a new line. So monthly JE depreciation. And I'm not sure what the depreciation account is. So let's find it. We'll pull up the finder. And I'm going to look for a description that contains DEP. All right, accumulated amortization and depreciation, that's account 1640, and the expense side is 6160. So we'll start with the debit. I will just make up something, 1500, press the insert key. Since we're using quick entry, my reference and description are repeated, 1640, 1500. So now I'm going to hit add. And to run my monthly depreciation, I would go into GL, periodic processing. GL, and we are going to create recurring entries. So we'll go, we'll just do 2020. We'll see what we get here. So it looks like we get a bunch of bank charges. So basically what has happened here is it has created recurring entries, everything since the beginning of the schedule all the way to the current month, which is why we got so many entries in this batch. So we can take a look at these. So once again, the batch description here says recurring entries and it shows the run date. My recommendation would be that you never change this batch description because it's important information. It tells me that it also shows you that in the type, but it also shows you the run date, and that's actually good information. So if I open this up, you can see now it looks like just a basic journal entry, just like any other journal entry. So here's my depreciation entry for October 2020. Now, in accounts payable and accounts receivable, you can actually create an invoice on the fly. So with journal entries, you can't create a recurring entry except for by going into periodic processing. But in AP and AR, you can actually go to the AP vendors recurring payables. And let's find one. We'll create our loan here. I can actually click on create invoice here. And then I get the options. Do I want my next scheduled invoice or do I want some other date? So if you just want to create your next schedule, then it's going to flag it as having created that November 1st, 2020 invoice, which you can see right here where my mouse is. If I want other, this would just be for some other, like if there was some other loan payment, some additional thing that you needed, you could actually do that and it would not impact your schedule. The same, by the way, goes for accounts receivable, AR customers. So if I choose one of my recurring AR customer invoices, I can create an invoice once again, next schedule or other, and then by creating a new batch, or usually you want to just create a new batch rather than adding to an existing, but that's up to you. So that is a brief overview of how to handle recurring transactions in Sage. Once again, the first thing you have to do is create the scheduling and common services. And then you would build your recurring transactions in AP vendors, AR customers, or VL transactions. And then when you're ready to create your recurring transactions, you would do that in periodic processing in all three modules. Thank you and have a great day.